We welcome you to FrameIt, where we work to deliver facts, increase transparency, and demand accountability in Alabama's democratic processes. FrameIt is brought to you by Alabama Values Progress, a media advocacy organization breaking the cycle of disinformation during the times where the truth is hard to find. On today's episode, we will discuss week 1 of the legislature's regular session. We'll take a look at some of the conversations and bills being tossed around the legislature this week. The regular session kicked back off with the Reapportionment Committee doing what it seems to do best, not care about the people they represent. If you recall, the Reapportionment Committee ignored the people's wishes in 2021 when it redistricted and landed the state in federal court, where a federal court ruled that the state legislature violated Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act by failing to create a second black voting district. That case was heard by SCOTUS in October of 2022, and we are currently waiting for that ruling to come down. If that wasn't enough, on Tuesday, March 21st, the committee met, but there was no audio for Alabamians to hear what they were discussing. Typically, Alabamians are able to watch the committee meetings and chamber convenings via live stream. The Reapportionment Committee has shown time and time again it does not want to be held accountable, that it does not believe it owes the people of Alabama any explanations for its decisions. It's crystal clear they can't be trusted.
Everything in history teaches me that y'all can't be trusted.
Last episode, I said that Governor Ivey didn't have anything in her State of the State address about repealing the grocery tax. However, this past week, Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth announced via Twitter that he believes it's time for lawmakers to give Alabamians permanent tax cuts. He said he met with the Alabama Grocers Association to outline how they can begin reducing the state's sales taxes on groceries and allow families to keep more of their money. But it seems that Alabama has some lawmakers that don't necessarily agree with getting rid of the entire sales tax on food items. While he hasn't filed the bill yet, Senator Arthur Orr has a draft bill that would take a penny off Alabama's 4-cent sales tax every year, but only on foods covered by the WIC program. That list covers items such as milk, eggs, cheese, fruits, veggies, whole grain bread, canned tuna, cereal, and infant formula. It's good to see more talk about abolishing sales taxes on groceries, but the Alabama legislature should consider fully repealing the taxes for the entire 4 cent to actually help Alabamians. On Wednesday, the Alabama House Health Committee held what they are calling an educational meeting on the state's health care coverage gap, which could be fixed if the state would expand Medicaid. That was a day after our friends at Alabama Arise held a lobby day for their Cover Alabama initiative, which lobbies for Medicaid expansion. Medicaid expansion would help give health care coverage to some 280,000 Alabamians. Alabama is one of 10 states in the country who has not yet expanded Medicaid. Just this last week, the North Carolina General Assembly gave its final approval for Medicaid expansion in North Carolina. North Carolina, like Alabama, has opposed Medicaid expansion for 13 years. During the committee meeting, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alabama, which is Alabama's largest provider of insurance, and the Alabama Hospital Association called on lawmakers to expand Medicaid. The Hospital Association told the committee that they see this as a way to help struggling hospitals, citing some $600 million in uncompensated care, which hospitals often have to write off when Alabamians are unable to pay their medical bills.
Every year, Alabama's hospitals provide average $600 million in uncompensated care. People who come through the door who don't have any insurance at all, uninsured or can't pay their bill. Alabama's hospitals provide about $600 million annually. Last year, 2022, you're familiar with the Disproportionate Share Program. We'll call it DISH. The Disproportionate Share Program is from the federal government, and it's based on our spend at Medicaid, which provides back the state of Alabama some money to be able to help offset the cost of that uncompensated care. In 2022, Alabama was able to draw down $300 million, of which a third of that was already the hospital's money. The state of Alabama did not put up anything for the state match. The hospitals did. So the 300 we pulled down, a little over 100, was because the hospitals put up the money to be able to draw down the match. So there's a little bit of relief in some of that. But again, if you look at the overall total and year over year, what business can operate, what business can sustain itself when you have to provide any services that are needed to certain individuals, regardless of the ability to pay. But you still have to do it, and you still have to continue providing the services everywhere else. There's not another business that could operate with those type of losses.
Legislators across the South love to take plays out of each other's playbooks. This would be a good example of one for Alabama to steal from North Carolina in 2023. And it's no secret that Alabama has the most stringent abortion ban in the country, with no exemptions for incest or rape. But a bill filed by Senator Vivian Figures seeks to repeal the state's abortion ban. A second bill, also by Figures, seeks to create exemptions for rape and incest. The freedom to fully control our bodies, lives, and futures is vital to all of us. We should be able to make decisions about pregnancy without barriers or political interference. Anti-abortion politicians and judges are trying to control our bodies and our lives, taking away our freedom and forcing their own will on the rest of us. This is exactly what has happened in Alabama. These efforts to control our bodies and lives are a result of systems of oppression that deny Black and brown people their rights and are rooted in white supremacy. Another bill that passed this week is a bill that would increase the mandatory minimum sentence for selling, manufacturing, delivering, and possessing a gram or more of fentanyl, and it passed the Alabama House 105-0. That bill was sponsored by Representative Matt Simpson. Under current law, those caught with fentanyl receive a fine for any amount and a prison sentence for 4 grams or more. The bill passed by the House gives a mandatory minimum sentence of 3 years in prison and a fine of $50,000 for 1 gram or more. For 2 to 4 grams, a person will be sentenced to a minimum of 10 years and to pay a minimum of $100,000 fine. Those convicted of having 4 grams to 8 grams would have a minimum sentence of 25 years and a minimum of $500,000 fine. 8 grams or more, the offender would be sentenced to life in prison in order to pay a minimum fine of $750,000. Statewide in Alabama, there were 1,069 fentanyl deaths in 2021, which was up from 463 the year before. And this is according to an Alabama 2023 drug assessment. Despite the issues with fentanyl, the legislature still hasn't done anything to tackle the overcrowding issue in the state's prison system. If fentanyl truly is as bad of an issue as they claim, these new sentencing guidelines would only add to the already horrendous conditions of Alabama's prisons. Another issue that came up this week was good times restrictions. Senator April Weaver filed the first Senate bill of the session, Senate Bill 1, which aims to further restrict good time for incarcerated people. Good time refers to the time incarcerated people can take off their sentence for good behavior in prison and is used as an incentive to stay out of trouble. The original version of the bill would have prevented an inmate from earning good time if they participated in civil disobedience or fought back in self-defense against an attack. An amendment put forward by Representative Bobby Singleton ensured that inmates would still receive good time even if they participated in acts of civil disobedience or if the Department of Corrections determined they were acting in self-defense. The amendment was successfully added, and the bill was passed out of the Alabama Senate on Thursday, March 23rd.
I just want to say that while we're under the scope of the federal government right now for overcrowdedness, on a 10-year sentence, your bill would keep a person in jail another 865 days longer. That's over 2 years longer. And so I don't know what that effect would have on what the federal government is looking at us in terms of overcrowdedness, because we're not moving people on parole. If we were paroling a lot of people, then the parole would go out and the good time numbers would go down. But the good time numbers goes up because there's no parolees going out. So they're gonna have to go one way or the other because people are gonna earn it because they're not being released. So we either got to get our parole system together and parole people that need to be out or we talk about disincentive. The disincentive is not given. As Senator Smitherman said, I can see some riots happening inside of our prison system because this is one of the only tools that DOC have at some point in time to deal with these inmates, to get them to go to classes, to get them to go into SAP program, to get them to go into other programs where they know they're going to get credit. But if they're sitting around, we can't work them. If they're sitting around doing nothing and feel like I'm not going to get credit for doing anything, so I might as well do something criminal sitting on my bunk today.
A bill by Representative Chris England seeks to establish more clear parole guidelines amid a downturn in the amount of paroles granted was sent to a subcommittee after the Republicans on the House Duty Committee said the guidelines could harm the parole board. Representative England said that the bill creates oversight and that everyone should be able to agree that the Pardons and Parole Board needs some work. Last year, the Pardons and Parole Board only granted parole for 10% of those who applied for parole. England's bill also provides for an appeals process if the parole board failed to adhere to the guidelines. The legislature needs to consider England's plan to help reduce the overcrowding in Alabama's prisons, which has skyrocketed since the 2019 overhaul of the parole system. Governor Ivey has also proposed the largest budgets in state history for both the Education Trust Fund and the State General Fund. The amounts are $8.79 billion for the Education Trust Fund and $2.96 billion for the General Trust Fund. Those budgets included $2.4 million for charter schools, money for the $400 tax rebates for Alabamians who filed a 2021 tax return, $150 for rural schools that desperately need capital improvements. Despite Alabama's record-breaking numbers, state budget officials in early March warned that the state legislature and Governor Ivey that the state appeared to be slowing in growth of sales taxes, which helped fund portions of the budgets. In a special session that ended March 16th, the state legislature just agreed to pay back the remaining $59 million that it had to borrow from the Alabama Trust Fund to balance the general fund budget a decade ago. Governor Ivey, in her State of the State address, boasted about her administration never having dealt with proration that the state was plagued with a decade ago. Hopefully, the state legislature will heed the warnings of the budget officials, but the Alabama legislature has a habit of making poor financial decisions. The Alabama legislature is taking spring break and will return on April the 4th after just 3 weeks of working. So in closing, let me put this in a frame for you. There are some good conversations coming in the Alabama legislature, but Alabamians cannot count on the mere talk about things such as grocery tax and abortion ban repeals, Medicaid expansion, and fair parole guidelines. We must make it perfectly clear to our legislatures what we as Alabamians expect. It's time they learn they work for us. Thank you for watching this episode of FrameIt. I'm Kendra Love, and I'm signing off. Join us next time as we continue to discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly going on at the Alabama State House. You can catch future episodes by following us on social media and visiting us on the web. See you later.